Trojan fans, welcome to another edition of the Peristyle Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, joined alongside Mr. Triple Double himself. Connor Morrissette is in the studio with me. How you doing today, Connor?
Doing well. That was a very enthusiastic hello, Trojans fans.
I've, woke up this morning, got a good night's sleep, did my workout. It was pretty tiring, made a big breakfast, and now I'm ready to go.
All right.
I got back-to-back shows. We're doing this one, and then we're doing the Podcast of Champions right afterwards because I'm leaving a little bit early. USC's got a big game against Minnesota this weekend, and a bunch of friends from my USC days are going to meet there. One that lives there. We're going to have like a little mini reunion. So getting this out of the way, the Podcast of Champions out of the way a little early, but excited to talk to you about everything that's been going on in this USC football program. Excited to talk to everyone out there. We are live on our YouTube channel over at Inside Troy. So if you're watching us live, I know it's a little bit earlier than we normally do this afternoon show. Sorry about that. Like I said, we're doing Podcast of Champions afterwards. So to try to fit it all in so Connor can get to practice and Dave can take care of his kids and all that stuff. We're squeezing this all in. So I appreciate Connor coming in a little bit early and everyone out there tuning in. It's great. If you have questions or comments for the show, podcast at uscfootball.com is our email address. You can also call or text us at 424-254-9141. We got a voicemail to play for you. You can send us texts as well. And if you have the Apple Podcasting app, it's great to get on there and leave us a 5-star review. You can do it on Spotify as well, a rating, but no review. Let me see if we have any new reviews there. Now, it didn't look like any new ones recently. So get in there and leave us a review. We appreciate when you do that, especially on the Apple Podcasting app. Helps to grow the show and all that rigmarole. I mentioned my breakfast, Connor. I was, tough workout this morning. Go to Trader Joe's the other day, pick up a bunch of stuff. So I love I like making breakfast, but I don't want to take too long to do stuff. So I like having like some kind of potatoes in my breakfast. They have these frozen hash browns that are great. I can put them in the oven. I actually used my toaster oven this morning, so I put them in the toaster oven for like 10 minutes. The last 5 minutes, put my English muffin in there that I also got from Trader Joe's. Good stuff. Eggs I got from Trader Joe's, mixed them up. A little of that garlic I put in there and some milk and some bacon from Trader Joe's. Made a big breakfast this morning, but it was good. A lot of Trader Joe's goodness. But if you do like, your potatoes at breakfast and you don't want to like grate them and soak them, and it kind of takes a while to make good breakfast potatoes, get them crispy and stuff. Having those like pre-made, the frozen hash browns have been a pretty good use of my breakfast time.
Those are really tasty and a great way to refuel after a big workout. So keep up the great work. Did you do the triple-double workout today?
It was not the triple-double. I forget what it was called. It was it was Pipeline. It was kind of surf inspired, but it was just hell. Like,
that sounds about right. Surf inspired down here in South Bay.
Yeah, Southern California. I don't know. Yeah, it's my F45 thing. So everyone out there does F45. It was a tough one today. It was like mostly cardio, just keep going. No water breaks. You just keep going. It's like, oh my God, I was dying. Getting older, Connor. It's really hard to keep up doing this stuff. But I was really looking forward to my breakfast, and thanks to Trader Joe's for putting all something good together there. All right. We got some good stuff to get to. Are you excited for Minnesota this weekend?
I am excited, and it's fun because the USC football team, I think we can all agree the team is pretty good, and now these next 2 weeks I think will establish, is USC a good team or is USC a great team? You go 2-0 these next 2 weeks against Minnesota on the road, a team that's going to be desperate. I think an upgrade over Wisconsin. I feel like after I watched their game against Michigan, they're a little bit better than Wisconsin, and then Penn State comes in to the Coliseum the following week. You go 2-0 over the next 2 weeks, and the sky's the limit, I think.
Yeah, that'd be big. It's a big game this week. It's another. You got to try to get your first Big Ten road win and all that. We will be there in Minnesota. Like I said, I'm going on Thursday morning. That's why. So we're going to have tunnel vision Thursday night, 7 p.m. It'll be just Connor and Jack because I will be traveling. So we'll set that up. So if you want a preview of the game, and then Connor will be leaving the next day. I'll be there out on Thursday, but we're going to have, if you're going to be traveling or if you're a USC fan in Minnesota, there's a lot of them. I know people have reached out to me. We have a wedding tailgate to go to on Saturday morning. People that met at USC and they live in Minnesota now. Excited for that. But we are going to have a meetup at Surly Brewery in Minneapolis. And start about 6 o'clock. I know Chris and Connor will be coming from the airport, probably like 7, but I'll have like my crew there, and we've had a really good time with all these meetups. So if you are out there and you're going to be around and you want to stop by, just Google Surly and go check it out. But it's cool. It's a really cool venue, really big. I didn't even contact them because it's just like this massive. Just go in there. It's like a big beer garden kind of thing. Food looks good. Looks like beer only. I don't think they even have wine. Maybe they do have wine. I'm not sure, but beer. And yeah, so it should be a lot of fun. But I'm looking forward to this one. Then we've had some really fun meetups. I mean, the Vegas was pretty awesome, but had a great time in Michigan too. And looking forward to this one in Minneapolis, Connor.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it too. You mentioned how it's such a big, wide open space, perfect for what we're trying to do. A lot of space to move around. I felt like the one in Michigan too, there was a lot of space. That's always important. I remember Colorado last year. That bar was fun, but that was tight.
Yes,
because a lot of people were in town for that game, and then it was the early kickoff. So it's nice, from my perspective, to have that meetup and then have the next day. I know Shotgun wants to go to the Mall of America. I don't know exactly what we'll do outside of the wedding tailgate. Of course, we'll hit that up. But it seems like we have a little bit of time, and then the game at night. And like I said earlier, Minnesota, this is going to be a desperate team. They're 0-2 in the Big Ten right now. I think they're going to give USC all they can handle, and USC on paper should win this game, but it's a really intriguing test, and we'll get into it today.
Yeah, James. So it's James's wedding, so congrats, James. And he gave us a bunch of brunch options for Saturday morning. He says Hell's Kitchen, Copper Hen, Spoon and Stable,
Awesome.
And then some hikes and bike rides and things. A lot of different info that he was like handing out there. So cool stuff. Go on the message boards on uscfootball.com if you want to. I put more information about Surly up there, and we will, if you have questions about, anything else that's going on, there's a whole thread on the Peristyle. People are talking about it, what to do when you get there and meet up. And I think it's been a lot of fun for the fans that are traveling to get in there. And some people are like, I don't get till Saturday morning. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, Saturday's game day. So if you want to go to meetups, show up a little bit earlier for this road game. I mean, you're traveling all the way to Minnesota. Like, go Friday, go Thursday, do something. Don't show up Saturday morning and I'm going to miss everything. Yeah, you showed up the day of the game. So I don't know what to tell you about that. Yes. Okay. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We do have a little bit of breaking news. USC football announced this morning, actually, it's Wednesday, scheduling Missouri State to open the 2025 college football season. It will be Missouri State Bears in the Coliseum on August 30th, 2025. They are in their final year of the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is an FCS conference, but it will officially join Conference USA, not USC, next season. So it will be an FBS program. So if you're wondering, oh crap, USC just scheduled an FCS program. I thought they've never done it before. No, they're the only team that's never done it. They still have it, because I guess they scheduled one, but they're not going to be one by the time they play.
I instantly thought of you when I read that release, and I was stuck in traffic looking at an email, so that's not good. Don't people shouldn't do that, but I was doing it, and I was scanning it, and I was like, where? Okay, I think they're FCS. I think they're FCS, and then the last line, they will be in Conference USA in transitioning to FBS, and USC will be their first game as an FBS school. So people,
some history, yeah.
I mean, I don't really have a take or anything about this game. Some people are like, oh, they got to schedule tougher opponents. You're in the Big Ten now. I don't have any issue with scheduling Missouri State to start next season, and just another game on the schedule that we know about now.
Yeah. When people are talking about, I like the tradition of not having scheduled an FCS program. Yeah. I know things are getting more challenging on that aspect, but having the West Coast Conference basically break up, there's more options now because you can play a non-conference game against the Cal or Stanford or the Mountain West schools. It's very confusing now. The big bombs that we're dropping, Texas, Oklahoma going to the SEC, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington going to the Big Ten. There's a ripple effect. And then all these there's FCS teams that are now, I think you used to have to pay $5,000 to jump from FCS to FBS, and now it's $5 million. Like they quite a big increase, the inflation on joining an FBS conference or becoming an FBS program. But all the Conference USAs, the American Athletic Conferences, we're seeing what's happening now with the Pac-12 and the Mountain West and trying to poach other leagues. There's so many teams that are changing, and then you have to, okay, I've heard of Missouri State, but I thought they were same thing. I thought they were FCS, but oh no, they're going to be Conference USA. All these programs that have moved around, and some have done well, some have struggling a little bit. So I like the tradition of keeping with only FBS programs, but I think USC schedule-wise, you have to schedule games like for anyone complaining, you need a cupcake game or two. USC plays a 9-game conference schedule like everyone in the Big Ten. Obviously, that's going to be challenging. You have Notre Dame every year. So there's 10 of your 12 that are taken with Power 4 teams, one of them being a national power like Notre Dame. It only gives you 2 left. So you'd like to get home games, and you'd like to get, this year was LSU as a neutral site game. You'd like that to be a home game like this Missouri State one. There's also the Big Ten and the SEC are meeting, Connor, and potentially doing a schedule alliance there. I wonder if USC would be left out of it just because they already have Notre Dame and there's 18 versus 16. But if you have Notre Dame and then an SEC school, that only leaves you 1 game if something like that goes through. So I have no problem with scheduling a game like this. Your schedule's plenty tough as it is.
Just to remind people, so now it's Missouri State at home next season, Georgia Southern at home, at Notre Dame next year. That's the non-conference as of right now. And then the Big Ten opponents at Illinois, at Nebraska, at Oregon, at Purdue, home against Iowa, home against Michigan State, home against Northwestern, and then home against UCLA. So that Big Ten schedule, tough.
Yeah, you got to go to Oregon. Like, that's no fun, It's funny. They go to Washington this year, and then they go to Oregon next year. Yeah. So if you have an issue with Missouri State, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. You can't play LSU like in every game and stuff. I forgot to pull up the comments. Yeah, we do have people in the chat, so thank you very much. If you're making comments in there, I can put them up on the screen as we go. I think that was the wrong one that went up there. This is hello, Ryan and Triple Double. We got Mark saying, fight on, everyone.
Hello,
Mark. Trojan Fight says, fight on, guys. And if you have questions, I'll star them, and we'll try to get to them a little bit later. Mark says, when do we play the Fighting Heltons? Yeah, that'll be next year in the Coliseum, right? Georgia Southern.
Time and date to be announced, I think, according to FBSschedules.com.
Okay.
Or no, September 6th, excuse me.
September 6th, okay. Good.
At home against Georgia Southern. That's when
so the opener,
Fighting Heltons.
Yeah, the Fighting Heltons. The opener is the week before that against Missouri State. Brian A. says, can't wait to meet you guys Friday at the meetup. That's great. Well, hopefully you can come out there. Sounds like you are. And look forward to meeting you as well. We usually take lots of pictures, do like a lot of chatting and stuff. So that should be a lot of fun. Well, let's get into, we sort of like talked to death about what happened, the comeback against Wisconsin and stuff, but we wanted to sort of check in with you, Connor, because we got to hear from Lincoln Riley a couple times on Monday at Trojans Live and then yesterday at practice. Positive injury updates, but just want to kind of get your thought. We can talk about the injuries, but anything else sort of like that was interesting from what Riley said the past couple of days.
Great call bringing up the injuries. Outside of Eric Gentry, Riley said he's questionable. We didn't see him at practice. Besides that, though, it was really encouraging. I mean, even Carson Tabaracci was back in full pads yesterday, USC's tight end, who I believe hurt his neck in the offseason, and we really weren't sure when he was going to come back, and now he's in pads. I don't know if he'll be able to play at Minnesota, but having him back was big. True freshman linebacker Jaden Walker was in full pads and had that yellow jersey removed, which means you can play, but you're not fully cleared for contact. So he's cleared for contact. I don't expect him to play much of a role this season, but he's finally healthy too. Akili Arnold was out there. He's questionable for Minnesota, but the fact that he was practicing, he was in pads, that's encouraging. Mekhi Lemon was back practicing and in pads. So some of these little nicks and bruises that USC picked up against Michigan and then against Wisconsin, outside of Eric Gentry, it looks like things are pretty good. Even backup center Killian O'Connor was back. So sometimes, Ryan, you got to get lucky with the injuries, and I think so far through the first third of the season here, USC is certainly in that category. They've had a few guys miss some time, but it was really encouraging to see everyone outside of Gentry return yesterday. That's a good sign, of course.
I think it is, too. I mean, Eric Gentry, if he's out, that's a big one.
And now with Raesjon Davis redshirting, that's another linebacker that you lose. So that is a big one, and we certainly should talk about that if he isn't able to play. But outside of him, very encouraging.
Yeah. Chris had a question. Chris Trevino, is a mushroom a vegetable?
No, it's a fungus.
Fungi or whatever. Yeah. I used to work in the produce department, but we would put it with the vegetables and stuff. It was in that. But yeah, that was funny that he was asking those questions on. Were you guys discussing it, or was Jack? Him and Jack.
I was there too, just kind of,
All right.
entertaining them. No, I'm just kidding. It was more of their conversation.
Yeah. Trojan Fight says, at Oregon again. Oh, wait, the wrong one came up there. At Oregon again. I'm sure the reason in being in this Big Ten now, but that's 2 now straight at Oregon.
Yeah, Riley wasn't happy about that when that came up, but I just think that's part of it. It was all totally randomized, how the schedule worked out. Bad break, I guess, but I don't know. You got to play tough teams. I don't really think it's like, oh, USC got screwed. They just kind of hurt by a random order from the Big Ten. I don't think it's this big injustice or anything.
Yeah. It said, haven't had them at home since 2019. There was that 2020 Pac-12 championship game that was in the Coliseum that Oregon upset USC. Yeah, that was there was that one. So, yeah, a couple trips to the Pacific Northwest, but at least you stay in the time zone. Like it could have been a trip to Rutgers, right? So it's a little less travel than what some of the guys would have to do there. So injury-wise, I think it's positive, where sort of USC is. Other stuff, talking about, maybe some of the offensive line talk. I know there was some of that where you tweeted out this morning that it was basically about Miller Moss was pressured about half the time he was against Michigan in the Wisconsin game. And I know some people commented, well, it's way different defensive line, and that's true. But it seems like there's some effort to try to make this offensive line perform better as the season goes on.
And I think Riley dialing up some plays for Moss to run a little bit more, that had to do with him trying to help his offensive line. There's ways to scheme around an offensive line that is inexperienced, that is struggling. And against Michigan, I don't know if Riley would come out and say this, but I believe that he thought his offensive line would be able to handle those guys a little bit better, and it just didn't work out that way, as we know. So he, like every good coach does, watched the tape, made some adjustments, and I think one of those adjustments to improving his offensive line was having Miller Moss roll out, run a little bit. We saw him rush for a touchdown, and those RPOs that were so famous in the Riley offense, I expect to see a little bit more of those. And in the past, it hasn't just been a run-pass option like you hand it to the running back or you could hang it or keep it and throw it. There's also been that third dimension to it with Caleb Williams, with other quarterbacks where they could take off, and I think we're starting to see Moss take off a little bit now, which, in my opinion, like I said, will help the offensive line because it is some good trickery a little bit. Those guys on the edges can fall for that fake, so that was good to see. And I think that the USC offensive tackles going forward, you look at the schedule, Penn State, that's a doozy. Don't want to make any prediction for how they'll fare in that game, but I watched the full Minnesota-Michigan game before coming over here, Ryan, and Minnesota's edge rushers, it's similar to Wisconsin. They're a solid defensive line group. They're probably better in the secondary, and their linebackers are probably the strength of that defense, but that's a defensive line, even on the road in a hostile environment where I think USC, those tackles who we've talked a lot about since Michigan, Elijah Page, Mason Murphy, it looks like USC is going to roll with them. Didn't play very well against Michigan. I expect them to play similarly to how they did against Wisconsin. Page had the one mistake where he blocked the guy Emmanuel Pregnon was blocking, and that led to a Miller Moss fumble, so we still could see some inconsistencies here and there, but by and large, they were a lot better, and I expect them to play at that same level, even on the road against a Minnesota team. They don't have any home wreckers on that defensive line.
No, they got a pretty good edge rusher, but outside of that, I know. No, sorry, that was looking at Penn State has a good edge rusher. That I was looking at, looking a little bit ahead. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we've had a pretty good pulse on this USC football team, and sometimes we don't. And
I don't know if I did going into the season.
But I feel like I've been pretty on with stuff every week. My 3 keys, it's like they're right on. And I think I said before going into this one, I think Miller Moss is going to keep it a couple times just to keep the defense, kind of honest. And he picked up 2 critical, I think it was a 3rd and 1, and then the 4th and 1 touchdown. And I forgot didn't put this picture up, but this is a great shot.
Yeah, we
got of Miller Moss, with the spin move and all that stuff kind of coming in there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can check it out. Yeah, and I just that's what was happening. So I don't know. I feel like I got this. Whatever, my 28th year or something covering this team, whatever it is. I'm starting to get the hang of it, I guess.
They should hire you as an analyst, Ryan. I do think the fun thing about this Minnesota game is yes, they're 0-2, and they have had some ups and downs, but I think Max Brosmer's pretty firmly the second best quarterback that USC will have faced this season. Not as good as Garrett Nussmeier, and probably not even close, but a guy who, if you're not ready to go, can certainly make you pay. And in that second half against Michigan, he led some gutsy drives. He impressed me in that game. The first half, a lot went wrong for Minnesota. They pretty much gifted Michigan 2 touchdowns. And if you watch that game and you saw that onside kick review, or that penalty, not review, go against Minnesota, I'm sure they wished it could have been reviewed. The Big Ten even changed how they officiate those plays now, where the referees line up, because they didn't like how Minnesota got the short end of the stick there with that offside call with the guy who really wasn't offside. But anyway, I think Minnesota, if USC comes out and plays that first half like they did against Wisconsin, I'm not sure they'll be able to overcome that on the road, where they were against Wisconsin at home and sort of everything went right for them in the second half. It's a Minnesota team, like we saw against Michigan, where if you make some mistakes, they're going to make you pay.
For sure. And it's funny, there's some, I'll be putting up, we do our I talked to the publisher or one of the beat reporters for the 247 site for whoever USC is playing. This week it's Ryan Burns over at the Minnesota site. And he does a great job covering the Gophers. I talked to him preseason for the Podcast of Champions about what to expect from Minnesota. And, you look at them, they played 2 non-power 5, power 4 teams, and they shut them both out. Their defense, Minnesota's defense ranked top 5, pass defense, but you played Iowa and Michigan, like 2 teams that don't really throw the ball. I think the Iowa game got away from, Minnesota was leading in the first half, and it got away from them. They just ran all over them in the second half. And the North Carolina game to open the season, they should have won that game, missed field goal at the end, I believe. And, for PJ Fleck, you're just like, oh, you're just kind of scratching your head. And then, they had a chance against Michigan and get that big return and set things up. And they fall short. And there was a bad call at the end. But, no guarantee you're going to, tie or win that game or whatever. But still, you were in it with Michigan in the big house. But they've taken quarters off. Like USC's taken, the first half off a couple of times. Outside the opening drive last week against Wisconsin, but the start of the Michigan game, USC was in neutral, not even go or in reverse or something. Start off fast against Wisconsin and then just sort of shut things down. Minnesota's been taken whole quarters off and then sort of had to fight back. And you saw them fight back late in the game against Michigan. They've also had a lot of offensive line problems like USC. I think it's 15 offensive line penalties through the first 5 games. That's a lot. I mean, that's just a lot of things. So this is a dangerous Minnesota team because you saw when USC was playing bad, things can go wrong. They put it together, play well, and you see the second half against Wisconsin. I think Minnesota has some similar stuff where they've played some really bad stretches, but if you don't have the offensive line commit a whole bunch of penalties or give up a big special teams play, I think Minnesota's going to be in a whole different place. So if you come in and play poorly and Minnesota plays well, this is a game that can definitely, bite you in the ass.
And we'll find out if Minnesota's pass defense has just been benefited by playing Iowa, who runs the ball really well, Michigan, who runs the ball really well. They're top 5 in passing yards against because they've just played offenses that run the ball way more than they throw it. So, of course, those numbers have boosted that pass defense. USC, that's going to just be a totally different challenge, and I'm interested to see what Minnesota looks like against a team that wants to pass the ball more. I do think USC, how they've run the ball hasn't been fantastic.
No, it's been bad.
They had 14 carries on first downs by running backs against Wisconsin last week, and they only averaged 3 yards per carry on first down. Lincoln Riley even said on Trojans Live, we need to be better on first down. To me, that was him saying we need to be better running the ball because they had a lot of successful pass plays on first down, but the running plays, for whatever reason, just weren't there. So you look at how Iowa beat Minnesota. Caleb Johnson, the great running back for the Hawkeyes, 21 carries, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then Khalil Mullings, he was doing what he usually does against Minnesota. He had another really solid game. Not as good as Johnson, but enough to win the game for Michigan. USC, their running attack, Woody Marks, I really like. Quentin Joyner, I really like. But the USC offensive line, I don't think is capable of run blocking the way Iowa has, the way Michigan has. So the blueprint to beat Minnesota has been to run the ball by these 2 teams. Can USC do that? Probably not. But the good news is they have an amazing passing attack with Miller Moss, who has defied my expectations this season and just been so good. Really strong group of receivers. USC is going to have to win in a different way. So it's a fun chess match going into Minnesota this week, looking just at how Minnesota's played these past couple weeks and what USC does differently.
I agree with you. And I think I want to try to work this into one of my 3 keys somehow, because I watched this USC offensive line. They're certainly struggling at pass protection, but I don't think they've been good with run blocking either. And when USC's had success running the ball, it's because it's setting up through the pass. So like Miller Moss completing some passes, and then you kind of sneak a run in. If you look, and I don't have this broken down this way, but you broke down the first down.
Yeah.
And that's, so that's a running down, right? You can just run the ball and then kind of see where you are and move forward. 1st and 10 is you can run the ball a lot. 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s. I know USC has struggled in those. I don't have the exact numbers, but when you see it and they're trying to, I just remember watching games earlier, and if you see Jacoby Lane catch a 9-yard pass and it's now 3rd and 1, you hope that he could have got the first down, because USC hadn't been good at getting any kind of push and going forward. Now the 4th and 1 against Wisconsin, it would end up being a quarterback keeper. And maybe that helps, that they can kind of alleviate some of that pressure on everyone crashing on Woody Marks or whoever the running back is at the time. But those are running downs, and USC struggled to have success there too. The successes come when you've moved the ball through the air a little bit, especially those intermediate routes, and then you can kind of do that little delayed handoff to Woody Marks, and he busts something. So I do want to see them get better on running, when it's like the defense is expecting you to run and you can actually still have success running the football. And it's been something that's lacking. I don't know how I would quantify that for the 5 keys, or the 3 keys. But that's definitely something I'm good to watch for. Can USC run when it looks like it's going to be a running down?
And just looking at Woody Marks' advanced stats, he had 49 yards after contact against LSU, 62 after contact against Utah State, 77 after contact against Michigan, and then it went down to 39 against Wisconsin. That's good for him that against Michigan he had 77 yards after contact, but that's not good for USC if your running back is getting hit early and then he has to fight and break all these tackles. So that's certainly something to watch going forward, because Marks is so strong. He's such a talented running back, but if the offensive line performs better, he will have more space, of course, and won't have to work so hard to get all of the yards that he has. I felt like specifically that Michigan game where he had 77 after contact. He had the big 65-yard run in that game, but outside of that, he was getting hit early and often, and it was just tough to come by. Against LSU, he had 2 touchdowns, but I felt like the running game was tough to come by. Against Wisconsin, it was sort of tough to come by a little bit. Can USC take a step forward in that regard against Minnesota? That's a big question.
And I think on the defensive side for USC, we talked about this before the Michigan game, defense travels. It traveled outside of 3 plays. The defense played extremely well. In the chat, Trojan Fight says Minnesota is 114th in rushing and 73rd in passing. Not a very dynamic Gophers offense. I think this could be really the key for USC. If Eric Gentry can't go, but getting Akili Arnold back, I think will help some of the communication stuff. They may have had some issues early a little bit in that game, but I feel the defense is going to travel. Now they played some good defenses. Michigan's very good. Iowa's got a very good defense. It was a rock fight against North Carolina. They put up some points in their the weaker opponent games, but I feel like this is something where the USC defense can go out and make a statement. Now Wisconsin got a couple explosive plays early, but then were shut down after that. My 3 keys were like no more than 2 explosive plays. They had that like early in the game, that 63-yarder I think it was, and another one. But they shut them down after that. It was more the bend but don't break. They weren't giving up the big play. I think if you can do the same thing, keep that bend but don't break mentality, Minnesota's probably not going to score a lot of points. And they've been a team that shot themselves in the foot quite a bit. So I'm interested to see how this defense plays. But I have a lot of confidence they're going to go in there and play pretty well.
Make no mistake, if USC is firing on all cylinders and playing an A-plus game, remember Lincoln Riley said against Michigan we played a C-level game and we still had a chance to win. If USC's at its best, they absolutely should win and should cover that 9.5-point spread. I don't know if it's changed, but it opened at 9.5. It's a Minnesota team that really is limited, but I do think they're better than Wisconsin, and I think that if USC isn't playing to its potential, it's certainly a losable game. Brosmer, like I said, is probably the second best quarterback USC's faced. I like the running backs for Minnesota, Darius Taylor especially. He had 2 touchdowns against Michigan. I feel like their receiving core is a little bit better than Wisconsin's. Wisconsin's offense coming into that USC game, those stats that the commenter had, very similar. Not very good in the passing game, and the running game sort of similar. They'd played Alabama and 2 lower-level opponents, so it wasn't an exact science. I don't know if those stats gave us the best indication of what Wisconsin's offense was, especially with a backup quarterback, but the numbers are the numbers. They weren't very good on offense, and they're up 11 at halftime against USC. So USC should take advantage, should win this game against Minnesota. Let's see what they do, because they haven't started the last 2 weeks very well in the first half, and it's a Minnesota team that's going to be really desperate, sort of like Michigan was. They were desperate to get their season back on track against USC after getting beaten pretty good against Texas and then struggling against Arkansas State. You lose to USC if you're Michigan, then the season might go up in flames. Same for Minnesota here, going to 0-3 in the Big Ten. That wouldn't be very good for PJ Fleck's team. They're going to be desperate, and that sort of adds a whole new dimension to this game that I'm excited about. But if USC is playing their best, they should win.
Yeah, they should. I think one thing to look out for too, Minnesota, the secondary, like USC secondary, I think the whole defense has played well. Doesn't have a single interception yet. Minnesota secondary has 8, so there's a lot of interceptions on that side of the ball. So I mean, that's something that we've seen Miller Moss throw a couple there, and we'll see if he can kind of avoid those big mistakes. Those are ones you kind of want to avoid on the road. I think on special teams too, Minnesota's given up some big plays. USC had some pretty bad plays on the punt return, and then they gave up that I think it was a kickoff return late against Wisconsin when they were trying to, after USC went up 17 or whatever it was. But I would say Lincoln Riley was asked about it a little bit, and he kind of gave an explanation that maybe Zachariah Branch is a little frustrated. That first, he said it was like a shank punt that went down to the 1, and then you sort of were pressing a little bit. We talked about this on Tunnel Vision. Like, it felt like that was going on, where there's probably not much you could have done about that punt because it's coming at a line drive, like low to the ground. But then you might press on the next one, which you did, muffed it, and then it ends up turning into a Wisconsin touchdown. But I think a big special teams play on the negative side could have an impact on this game because both teams have shown the propensity to do that.
Minnesota has a really highly ranked true freshman who was a really highly ranked recruit, Coy Parrish, who had that big return in the punt game against Michigan that set them up for success at the end of the game. So they have a dangerous punt returner like USC does, and I think for the first time this season we'll have a fun return matchup. Zachariah Branch, I know he hasn't been quite as advertised as a punt returner, but he did have that big return against LSU. Finally, on the other sideline, there is a weapon in the punt return game. I can't get that out of my mouth there. So that's something to watch as well. And I just hearing you talk about that Riley quote, Ryan, I wonder what Wisconsin would say if their punter felt like he shanked that punt. I felt like he executed that perfectly. I don't really think that was a shank. I think that's exactly what they wanted to do, and they nailed it.
If it was, I mean, it was a 74-yard punt, and there's no way. And we were looking at each other like, what could you have done? I guess you could have tried to, but if you try to stop a low line drive like that, it could easily just bounce off you. And if it's going to go all the way to the 1, it could have gone 1 more yard and gone into the end zone too. It was hard for the return team. Like, it just was perfect.
I didn't really fault Branch on that one because you saw what happened when he tried to pick up a bouncing ball later. He muffed it. So that wouldn't have been a good course of action. Talked to Jack about the play, and he felt like if it's that low, you got to block it. You got to get your hands up and try to block a kick like that. Easier said than done, of course.
At the line of scrimmage, not Branch,
Yeah, that's probably what they should have done, but that's a tough ask.
To get, it's kind of like, how did you get it over the line?
At that trajectory, crazy.
But I think in general on special teams, people don't want to tune out for special teams, but that's been a big part of it. I think in general, USC's been better. I mean, to see the kickoffs, they've been booming. Just the field goals have been good outside. I think just one miss, right? There's only been one. Yeah,
that short miss in Allegiant Stadium that Lance had, and he just kicked it dead straight, and they were on the hash. So you want to make those kicks. I think it was like a 29-yarder. That was a big mistake, but it wasn't like a total shank or anything. He just misplayed it by a couple inches.
But there have been some sort of, and I think we talked about, now there's a special teams coordinator with just a different title or whatever. But Shotguns pointed out some some math problems when you need 11 guys on the field, and it hasn't always been the case. So there are some chinks in the armor a little bit. It's maybe not every I is dotted and T is crossed on special teams like we thought, but I think it's better overall. And a few things you can kind of clean up. And having 10 guys on a PAT, I don't know if it matters that much. I mean, whatever. It's like it's something you want that all to be cleaned up. But there've been a few little things like that. But the first three punt returns for USC all turned into terrible situations, and maybe one of them wasn't Branch's fault. I mean, probably two of them, because he fair caught one at the 8, so at least it's not the 1. But then there was a holding call, and it went back to the 4, and of course the muff. But I think something you can clean up for sure, and it can make a big difference. It hadn't really made a big difference until the Wisconsin game, I think, where, the missed field goal was one thing, but it was small compared to everything else. A little more sort of like looseness on special teams, I think, happened in Wisconsin. They need to tighten that up.
I agree, and I agree with what you're saying about the special teams has been better overall. I mean, the punting has been night and day from last year. The field goal unit has looked a lot better. And Lincoln Riley had an interesting quote on Trojans Live talking about his specialists, who he said he felt like were two of the best in the country, his offense and his defense. He said, I think we can thrive in a lot of different scenarios. And I agree with that completely, and we've seen that. You can win or get really close to winning that defensive slugfest sort of struggle game like we saw against Michigan, and then you can score a lot of points like we saw against Wisconsin when your back's against the wall at halftime like it was. So they're winning different sort of games, whereas last year, you look at how USC was winning. I mean, it's 50-49 against Cal. It's needing these massive offensive outputs to just win by like a point or two. The Arizona game comes to mind, too. You needed to outscore teams last year, where this year you can win on defense. You can probably make a clutch kick if it comes to that. Your punter's a weapon. I totally agree with what he said. I think we can thrive in a lot of different scenarios. Through 4 games, that's absolutely been the case.
Yeah. We did a comment in the chat. Let me put it up here. From Super OC Holmes, we got close to blocking a few punts. Yeah, I think there was a few close ones there. But, I mean, I've maintained all along, if you get a spectacular play like a punt block or a return for a touchdown or a big return into the plus side of the field, like that's great. But to me, that's more gravy. I just don't want you to have the huge mistakes. We've seen more huge mistakes, but I think the general average play has been good or above average kind of thing. The kickoffs have been awesome. A lot of the punts, maybe not as much in the Wisconsin game, but a lot of the punts were really, really good. There were some bad plays, more bad plays in the Wisconsin one. If you get the big, I'm just not someone that's saying, hey, go to try to block every punt, try to return everything for a touchdown, whatever. Just don't, you're good enough on defense, you're good enough on offense. Don't put yourself in a negative position. And that's what USC kind of done for years. So just make it more neutral and with some upside of maybe Branch breaks one, or maybe Gentry gets through and blocks a punt or whatever. But I wouldn't sell out for that with the risky side of a bad play happens and you kind of put yourself in a hole.
I wonder if Mekhi Lemon had been healthy, if he would have taken the last few punts off of Zachariah Branch's hands because Branch fumbled.
Yeah.
Lemon's the backup to Branch. They have some other people who work on it in practice, but it's really those two guys and then a pretty big drop to that third string punt returner. I don't even know who it would be at this point. I wonder if he was healthy, if Branch would have gone to the bench, but they just didn't have that option with Lemon out. And if we see Branch make another mistake, I feel like pretty soon you got to pull the plug on him. So maybe this week with Lemon back, if we do see Branch have an issue, USC might have a new punt returner, a guy who I think would be really exciting back there. We have such high expectations for Branch. If he isn't able to reach him for whatever reason, Mekhi Lemon's a pretty good backup option, and I'd be excited to see what he could do.
Yeah, just mentally at that point.
Yeah.
If you're just like, there's a frustration there with the low kick and then the frustration of fumbling, it's like, hey, you're not benched. We're just going to like put someone else, just get like a clear head out there.
You're not benched, but you're benched.
We're going to like, let someone else handle this.
I get it.
Yeah. It wasn't, don't feel like it's a benching kind of thing or whatever. Anything else from this week you want to chat about, or we can do some questions and stuff?
Well, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So the big news, of course, from last week, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on it, was the Bear Alexander stuff.
Yes.
And it's just been nothing from USC about his status with the team and what's going to happen going forward. So he announced his red shirt last Wednesday, and his father, Tony Jones, told ESPN, we're going to stay with the team in practice. And he wasn't at the game against Wisconsin. He wasn't at practice on Tuesday. the precedent for players who announce mid-season redshirts under Lincoln Riley, Gary Bryant did it, Raleek Brown did it, Raesjon Davis is doing it this year. You just get moved to scout team and you continue to practice. But I don't think that's going to happen with Bear Alexander, even though maybe his camp said that was the plan, because he hasn't been out there. And how can USC have him around after what's transpired? But they haven't directly come out and said that, and I wonder why. Is it an NIL thing? Can they say you're not on the – if they say you're not on the team anymore, does that mean that an NIL thing would have to happen where he'd get money? Like, I don't understand why Riley can't just say he violated a team rule, or he wasn't good for our culture and he's not practicing with us anymore. We wish him the best. Maybe that sets a bad precedent for recruits going forward. I don't know why they can't just come out and say he's not going to be with the team anymore. It seems like that's the plan of action that they've taken, and I don't expect him to be with the team. But could he return? It's possible because USC hasn't ruled it out.
Yeah, they're really not saying anything about it, but all of us, if you listen to what we said afterwards, it just didn't seem like if you were expecting Bear to be around and playing on this, he would be a huge help if he played on the scout team.
If he had his stuff together.
If he was going to play.
I mean? If he was going to be a good teammate.
But none of us thought that was going to be the case. And, I mean, sometimes you just have to read the room. And just because someone's not saying something, look at what was said, look at what happened, look at the actions, and come to the conclusion. I mean, all I looked at was literally Lincoln Riley getting kind of upset at the media scrum, saying that this is a non-story about Bear Alexander. And for him to be announcing a red shirt less than 24 hours later, there was a major disconnect there. Like, you don't come out and basically chastise people for coming up with this, making this story up. And it turns into a story that your most, high profile defensive lineman is not going to be playing anymore for the season. That's obviously a huge story. To me, if I'm Lincoln Riley, I'm not saying that if I don't know it to be true. And if that's was the case, it's a situation where he was lied to or something happened, whatever it was. But in 24 hours, that whole thing fell apart. I really believe Lincoln Riley felt like this was not going to be an issue going forward, and it ended up being that. So he looks bad. You're the head coach. You're and you don't want people to make you look bad. You're the CEO of a company, and some, lower level guy in the company makes you look terrible at a meeting. That's not going to go over well. And I don't think that guy would be around the company anymore. And I don't think Bear Alexander was going to be around the team anymore. And so far that's right. So we'll see. That's just from seeing what we saw. If I was Lincoln Riley, I'd be pretty pissed off that I was very, very wrong with that quickly. And maybe it was Lincoln Riley's mistake that he felt like they could fix it and he was confident they could, but it seemed like he was confident that it was fixed and then something changed. And whatever that was, I don't think was going to leave him with a great taste in his mouth. So my expectations of Bear being around are 0.
Same. Riley said yesterday, I think I've said all I'm going to on the matter or something along those lines. He's not going to answer for it anymore. So they don't really need to come out and say anything, but I do think it's interesting that this player was so disrespectful to just the USC program, and USC, I guess they're taking the high road by not saying anything. But if I was in charge, I'd just say, look, he's not going to be with the team anymore. I don't exactly know why they can't say that, but maybe it has to do with NIL. Maybe it would set a bad precedent with recruits, and that's why they're choosing to take that route. I'm just not exactly sure why at this point.
Yeah, Mark says, I thought we were done talking about it. I guess we are. Adam, glad he's gone. Too much distraction. Time to move on. Yeah, and I think it's all you can do in a situation like this is come out and perform. And we'll see some younger guys have a chance to step up. Defense played pretty well. I think UNLV handled the situation great, where their quarterback from Holy Cross sits out and boom, they go out and destroy Fresno State, and they're 4-0 and ranked for the very first time. I think in both cases, the player probably is making the wrong choice, and you're probably have people in your ear telling you to do something that maybe has their best interests in the mind instead of yours. So.
And what's funny too is it's about playing time with Bear, and we can again move on in a second. And he was playing. It wasn't like he was totally benched. He just wanted to be playing more. It wasn't an NIL dispute. That was what happened in the spring. So different situation, but I agree with you. I don't know why he made this choice, or I mean I know why, but I don't think it is the right choice.
Yeah. If I was
Systematic
recommending
mistake.
something, I would you should keep playing. That's your best course of action. GP wants to know what Inside Troy shows are doing live callers. So we'll do them on Tunnel Vision. We've had some technical difficulties the last couple of weeks. I've been working with the company that we do the live callers through, the program, and hopefully we'll have that fixed. Not sure if we'll have it Thursday because I won't be here, so it'll probably be easier to start it on the Sunday show, the recap for Minnesota. But it's always fun to get live calls. We just don't usually do live calls on these podcasts, but I guess we could. Maybe if it's a slow week or something, we'll do some live calls. But all right, well, let's take a break and we'll come back and answer your questions. We've got a bunch in the chat, so I'll try to get to all those. We got a voicemail and email and stuff as well. Back in a minute, everyone. All righty, we're back here on the Peristyle Podcast. Got a voicemail for you. Connor, you ready?
Ready.
Our buddy Curtis? Here you go.
Hey, Ryan. We have the most dangerous kick and punt returner in the nation. His comparable is Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins. And he's fair catching. You should never do that if you have the best kick returner in the nation. The most elusive, the fastest, the best chance to return a kick is him. And he's fair catching? I don't agree. Curtis from Moreno Valley.
I think a lot of fans feel the same way. And Ryan, we've talked about the Michigan game a lot when USC needed points at the end of that game after the touchdown by Mullings. Michigan kicked off and Branch immediately signaled for fair catch. You got your best skill position player arguably with the ball in his hands, like let's let him go do something. So I don't know if that was him just saying we're going to trust the offense or if that was from the coaching staff. How quick it happened makes me think it was from the coaching staff. But has Branch in the last few weeks proven that he's worthy of not fair catching? You know what I mean? Like the muff was a big mistake, and he does have all this potential, but we really haven't seen him have a great punt return since that LSU game. He had the nice return against Michigan that was more across the field than up the field, and it only netted about 8 yards. But still, those were 8 really hard-earned yards. And when you think of Zachariah Branch as a punt returner, that's sort of like the worst-case scenario you feel like with him back there. But we've seen this year the real worst-case scenario is him muffing the ball. And I agree he has all that potential, but I don't know if he's earned the right to be that returner right now because he's made some mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, the being a dangerous kick and punt returner, that's great, but you have to show it. And if you're going to fumble 3 and return 1 for a touchdown, is that worth it? Like, probably not. If you're going to, fair catch 7 and return 1 for a touchdown, you want that. That's a good trade-off. But if you're going to have like a few negative plays, does it offset the chance of getting a big positive play? And that comes down to coaching and the decisions. And if you feel like he's doing enough positive things for all that potential, like you said, Curtis, dangerous versus and if there's not a big return, it's a neutral play, then obviously you want to do it. I think there's just been a few of the too many of the negative plays, and so then you have to make some decisions there. Do you want to return or not? What's best for the team? And that's that's why Lincoln Riley gets paid a crap ton of money. You want to make those kind of decisions, figure that stuff out. We had an email from Chris. Said, hey, Ryan, wondering if you could ask the university and let us know on one of the podcasts, how did they determine the game was a sellout? So we've actually had people in the chat talking about this, so hopefully this will answer all those questions you guys had in there. He says, there were at least 7,000 to 10,000 empty seats in that stadium, and clearly there was sections where there couldn't have been any seats sold because there was nobody sitting in them. It's almost an embarrassment. We haven't had a really, truly full Coliseum since the remodel of the stadium. And when they say a sellout, what does that mean? What are they basing it on? How was the attendance calculated? I know it's not critical information, but it's kind of disappointing. They call it a sellout, and it clearly was not close to full. Thank you from Chris. Actually, I'll get your thoughts on this, Connor, but I emailed one of my friends, contacts over at USC that in the ticket department, they directed me to somebody, and he wrote this to me. He said, We determine sellouts by the number of tickets purchased and distributed to the public because the capacity inside the Coliseum for USC football games can be adjusted based on the layout of the stadium, the turnout in the student section, and the quality of the seats made available for purchase. This number tends to be between 72 and 74,000 tickets distributed. So it can change, but typically in that 72 to 74,000 range. If there's that many tickets out and there's no more available, then that is considered a sellout from what I've been told. But any thoughts on that, Connor?
That makes sense because you only have so many tickets. So if they give out 74,000, maybe they give away 5,000 and they sell the rest of them to the public and all those tickets get sold. They can't control if someone doesn't use their ticket and go to the game. I understand why people are frustrated when there are a lot of open seats, but that email makes a lot of sense to me. If you sell the max amount of tickets that you can, or you make available the max amount of tickets you can, it's a sellout. And if people don't show up, it might not look like a sellout on TV. I don't think you can determine if it's a sellout or not at the day of the game. Can you? Maybe if like all the tickets scan to get in. I don't even know how it works.
Yeah.
Do people scan? I guess you scan your ticket, so maybe you could determine if it's a sellout after the fact, and that might make people feel better. But I don't have a huge problem with how it's done right now.
I think it changed over the years, but attendance became tickets out, and I think
probably because that is the higher number.
Yes, and so when you look at it only looks like there's 45,000 people in the Coliseum, and they announce like 60,000. People are like, hey, what's going on? Same thing. You announce the sellout, and there was a lot of empty seats. I mean, even in the good sections, I was looking in the middle of the first quarter, there was a lot of open seats. And that's, I think that's just the nature of sports these days. It's tough, and especially in LA, pro market, it's tough to get all that kind of sold. But it's good for the university that the tickets were all sold, but you'd like to see more people in the stands. So, but yeah, that's what the official response I got from USC, and then Connor's thoughts. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Do some chat comments. Serb, do we expect to see Jaib Abasiri get some playing time this Saturday?
G-Day.
G-Day. Why do I say G-Day?
G-Day. Or G-Day. It might even be G-Day.
G-Day?
I'm probably saying it wrong too. I think it's G-Day. I thought
He's
he was
from Minnesota.
Excuse me. Yes, he is. I thought he was going to play against Wisconsin, and he didn't. So I'll say maybe. The good news is he used to be in a scout team jersey earlier in the season, and he was wearing his 97 jersey at practice yesterday, which indicates he's off the scout team and that they do have a role for him with that top unit. So we'll see. He did not play, like I said, against Wisconsin, and that surprised me, but he should have an opportunity in the future because USC is down a defensive lineman, obviously, and he looks like the next man up.
G-Day or G-Day. Okay. But yeah, homecoming for him potentially. Oh wait, this was the wrong one. This put up, we said, this is SoCal, baby. 10% of the will flake any event or activity. That's true. I think you're going to see that in Southern California. So, and then Marcel says, our game environment compared to an Alabama is crazy. Can we get to that level? I mean, our football team is not on the Bama level. No, I think if you're going to talk about a college, like Alabama has no professional sports whatsoever. It's the only game in town. You're at Nebraska. They've sold out like 400 straight games. That's the only game in town. You can pick whatever you want here in Southern California. So I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it's a little different situation where you're talking about a whole state that would be around one football program that they get 7 home games a year, or a place like LA where there's, you have Shohei Ohtani just up the street. Like, okay, like what are you going to watch? I don't know. I mean, you got to pick what you want. You can't go to everything.
The one thing that I'd like to see end, and I know you're on the same page with me on this, Ryan, is like at the game, the PA or DJ or whatever, Wisconsin has said that you need to be quiet. Let's prove them wrong. Like, how about like, let's get loud? What's wrong with let's get loud? I don't know why they need the DJ or whatever has all these things that he said. Like, come on, man. I don't know. That was kind of bothering me this week.
I would say one time you could do it, and they kept doing it, and it was just like.
I mean, it did get loud, but
I put it on I think was it was it a war room thing? I forget
Ghost
what.
notes, maybe?
I was in my ghost notes. I put it in the ghost notes, and some people were like, "But it actually worked." It did get people loud, but
There's other ways.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. But I'm
To
an old
each
guy.
their own, I guess.
I don't want to be the old guy yelling at
with you.
clouds.
I'm
You're a
with
younger guy, so at least we got that going for you. But next up, Gizzard Squid. How much has changed with the way the Trojans travel, arrival airlines and earlier arrival, giving the new, quote, away game destinations? Huge change. And like Super OC Holmes was like, when is the team leaving for Minnesota? On Friday? I believe it's Friday morning. People were asking about that for the Michigan game too. They wanted USC to leave early, but I think they're just leaving the day before. I don't know. Anything else changed that you know of?
I don't think in terms of like when they leave has changed, but of course the logistics change when you're traveling to different venues. Hearing Riley talk about it, it's been more like, well, we don't know the best hotels. We don't know the best restaurants. We have talked to NFL teams in town, the Rams and the Chargers and other programs about those questions, but I don't think like their travel schedule has changed much. It's not like they're going a day early to walk around the stadium. Riley kind of said that was stupid by saying the sky's blue here, the sky's blue in Michigan. Why do we need to go there a day early and walk around? Which I thought was kind of funny. So the logistics in terms of when they leave and when they're departing the game, they always leave right after the game ends pretty much. That hasn't changed, but of course where they stay and where they eat, that's changed a whole lot.
Yeah. Super OC Holmes also asked, did SC change their offensive line in the second half, or it was the same as the first half and they just played better? And who starts this next game?
They kept everyone the same outside of right guard, which they continued to switch, but Alani Noah, for whatever reason, ended up playing way more snaps than Amos Talele, who started the game, but Amos did continue to rotate in the second half. I didn't exactly see when sort of that rotation went awry because Alani played a lot more snaps. Maybe he was just in on some of the longer
Yeah, I think
drives.
some of the drives were longer too,
So they did change it in the second half, but I think they played pretty similarly. It wasn't like Miller stopped taking hits in the second half. The one big mistake came at the end of the first half when Wisconsin had that delayed blitz and Moss fumbled.
Yeah.
They just played, the operation was just cleaner.
Yep, I agree. Serb says, do you think the offense hasn't shown its true potential? Seems to me it hasn't hit its full stride yet.
I think it can get a lot better, but it all depends on the offensive line. And if they're protecting Miller and run blocking better, then we'll see better offense. I mean, Miller to me has been awesome, and we've seen Jacoby Lane take some strides. Quentin Joyner, I think, deserves some more carries. Zachariah Branch, a little bit up and down, but I think he's been solid. Overall, the offensive line has probably been the biggest weakness so far, and then the receivers maybe at some points haven't been quite as good as you'd expect, but I think improved offensive line play, you get that, and everything is going to take a step up, and to me, that's the key to the whole thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think this offense will be fine if they just get some decent protection and do some blocking. So it's going to be, it'll go as far as the offensive line can take it, in my opinion. KG says, Gentry and Akili are, he said an ankle, I think he means Akili, are out most likely. No Bear and no Raesjon. Is our depth okay? Will we be okay?
Well, linebacker automatically is interesting because if there's one more injury there, Cobb or Easton Mascarenas Arnold, we've seen that Matt Entz and Danton Lynn are good with playing two linebackers pretty much the whole way with that top group. He did that against Utah State when Mason Cobb couldn't play. But if one of those guys isn't able to go, then the depth gets a little scary real quick.
Yeah.
Desmond Stevens is in there. Garrison Madden is in there. It's either a guy who is a pure special teams player right now in Madden or a true freshman with no Raesjon Davis there. So the depth is okay right now, but one injury, then probably not. Everywhere else, I feel like the depth is pretty solid. Even in the middle of that defensive line, it's sort of like the linebackers, to me, fine right now, but one injury away from sort of being a little scary. Edge rushing, I think, is pretty solid. And then in the secondary, they have a lot of depth.
Yeah, when you're looking at the defensive line, is Gavin Meyer and Nate Clifton this dominating force? No, they're good players and they've been helping out. But I think, Bear Alexander had the potential to be a superstar and wasn't getting as many reps. So that tells you what you need to know. So I think it's more about, hey, they like rotating the bodies there in the defensive line, They like who they have at linebacker. So if you had to have a Gentry and like a Cobb out, then it's going to be, then you're going to get some questions and stuff there. They seem to do a pretty good job replacing Akili Arnold, but having him back, being a green dot guy, I think will help. But I think depth overall, especially some of the guys that came back this week, is in a good spot for most every place, maybe except the offensive line. There's some problems and linebacker, like you mentioned. West Texas Mike. This came from earlier. Who have you fired, Ryan? Has Connor's dad tweeted about his screen time on tunnel vision?
I don't think my dad's ever watched a second of television.
Really? Does your girlfriend watch?
Sometimes. My mom watches sometimes, but my dad, he's a busy guy.
And I fired a bunch of people, West Texas Mike. I've been doing this a long time, so I've had a lot of people come through.
Any good firing stories that you can share?
Probably not that I can share. But, yeah, I mean, it's
You're
funny.
outta
There's a
here.
lot of people, and it's sort of like a testament to like when you find the right person. I've definitely hired people that you could tell right away this is not working out. Like they're not doing what they should be doing. They're
I remember when you had that chat with me, and I shaped up real quick.
No, you've been good from the beginning. But even like when I hired Keely, I've had a lot of interns, and Keely was great from the jump. And Keely and I have spoke at different sports business classes and stuff. And like her advice to people is just make yourself invaluable. Like if you're worried about what what this can do for you, just go do go kick ass. And then then the person can't not have you around. And so you make yourself invaluable. And so there's a lot of people, and I think Connor has done that. A bunch of people that I've brought in. Hell, I hired Gerard more than like 20 years ago. He was a poster on the message board. He's been great. But and there's a lot of people that have made themselves very much replaceable, and I will replace them if that's the case. So I got no problem firing people, West Texas Mike. So I love doing that. Okay, let's go. Blackie Chan has a few. What do you think? Who do you think will replace Branch on returns?
It would be Mackay, if anyone.
Yeah, it looks like Mackay Lemon. He's back at practice this week. He caught some passes or some kicks at practice yesterday, so it seems like that would be the case. He also wants to know, do you expect other players on the team to redshirt or transfer?
I asked Riley yesterday, and he said no one else has approached him about redshirting. So one guy who I was wondering maybe if he would or wouldn't, I was looking at Prophet Brown. Could he be someone?
Yeah.
And I would need to check if he has even used his redshirt yet, so that might have been a bad thing by me. But I was wondering about him. So he already has used it, so he couldn't have even done it. But he's someone who's sort of on the fringe of playing his natural spot. So I was looking at him, but he had his usual number. I don't anticipate anyone else redshirting. And Riley, according to what he said yesterday, doesn't either.
Yeah, 4 games down. This was sort of like the place, where you kind of had to make a choice, and we've seen it a little bit. It's not been a, epidemic across the country of people redshirting and stuff, but it's just one of those things. It happens, and you go from there. Last one from Blackie Chan. Are you doing a meetup in Minnesota? Yes, we talked about this earlier in the show. We will do a meetup at the Surly Brewery Hall in Minneapolis. It's a massive place, 6 p.m.-ish or so. I mean, come whenever. Friday we'll be there most of the evening, and it should be a lot of fun. Just we had fun meetups in Vegas, 3 different meetups in 3 days in Las Vegas, and then we did a fun one in Michigan and Ypsilanti, and that was a big place too.
Yeah, that was fun.
Like big Dave and Buster's, and
Yeah.
all that. It was like that kind of place. And so we'll do a fun one in Minneapolis. Meet up, chat. You got a lot of time because it's a late game. So come. I know there's some tailgates and stuff going on. We're gonna go to a wedding tailgate with James. They're getting married, so congrats to them. And should be a lot of fun. Blackie Chan says Surly is really good. Okay, I'm down. Perfect. Good. Well, we'll hope to see you there. Glad to get people from the chat in there. We always get a lot of people showing up. A lot of travelers. They go to most every game. They want to come to our meetups. But it's fun to see the people that are like locals that live there, and they've been waiting since 2010 for USC to come back to Minneapolis. So that's cool. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember seeing Blackie Chan gaming at Colorado, and it sounds like he'll be at Minnesota, so we'll have to say hi again.
Yes. It's fun saying hi to everyone, and it's a lot of fun doing these shows. So, yeah, we got, well, not too bad, a little over an hour. I got to save my voice because it's losing it, and I got a whole nother show to do. But if you guys want to stick around, you go to the Podcast of Champions feed if you're watching that, or, you know, on the YouTube. We'll talk about, I mean, if you watch the show, listen to the show, David covers UCLA, I obviously cover USC. Always a competition between us. I'm destroying him in the picks against the spread. Last week I was 7-1 picking. Unfortunately, you know, one of them was a bad beat that Connor was on the wrong end of.
Hey, that's okay.
It happens. But yes, I really get into the picks, especially when I'm beating his ass. So if you like to talk some trash to David, plus it's a lot of fun when UCLA is like absolutely terrible. And he's sort of like, I don't say he's pulling for a 1-11 season for UCLA, but he kind of knows it's coming, and it looks like they're staring at right in the face. The Bruins play Penn State this week. So they got Oregon, Penn State. I forget who they get next, but it's not a fun slate for the Bruins. So probably a lot of losses over there. And some of the USC fans like to kind of, you know, go over there and lick up his tears, but it's but it's good. He had some optimism going into the season where he picked USC to go 6-6 and UCLA to go 6-6. And now he's like, now he knows it's over. That was like a very short-lived like piece of optimism. And now he's just kind of like, you know, he's full on knowing that this team's going to be absolute garbage. So come over and check out the show if you want to. Even if you can stick around, Connor, if you want, you know.
I got to get some lunch.
Oh, yeah. We got to feed you. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up. For Connor Morrissette, I am Ryan Abraham, and really hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you're headed out to Minneapolis, come see us. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we will talk to you all next time.